Welcome to the Play to Win podcast, where we talk about winning in cEDH. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Cameron.
We're talking about Yasharn today. This is kind of like a deck tech, sort of like a deep dive into Yasharn. Is it very good? Is it not so good at all? We're going to talk about that today on the podcast.
Now, we did see this deck do insanely well on its first time around on the show.
Yeah.
Which is usually not necessarily the greatest way to indicate how it's going to be in the actual meta.
It's small sample size, and our games are kind of gimmicky, right? We're choosing the best Zendikar deck, and it's very early in Zendikar's release, so we missed some things. I've changed the deck since then, and it's not exactly like what the Wild will look like.
But there were a lot of interactions that came up that specifically caught us off guard as to what Yasharn can shut off himself.
Yeah,
so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
That's what we're doing.
So the first thing we should do is we should go over what Yasharn actually is. Yasharn is the new pig in town. A great Stax piece, I think. Yasharn is a 4-mana green-white legendary elemental boar. When it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a basic forest and a basic plains, reveal them, and put them right into your hand, not into play. That would be very good.
Holy fish.
And the second line, the most important line, is players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. That line is kind of tricky. We'll be going back over things that it shuts off and things that you think it should shut off, but maybe that it doesn't shut off. So players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land abilities. Either one of those things. So even though like a fetch land, it's a land, it's not a non-land, it is a land, you're still paying life to activate the ability of cracking it to look for another land. So Yasharn would shut that off. But something like Tymna, where Tymna is a triggered ability that draws you the card, not an activated ability, so it doesn't shut off Tymna. Okay.
Those are the two things that you're really looking for with the life loss aspect of it. And I think that this is the part of the card that was the most confusing, I know, for us.
Yeah, and definitely in the comments of the first video, because it does think there's things that you think it should shut off, like Tymna or something like that, and then things that you forget that it shuts off, like Mana Confluence. We didn't realize that.
Exactly. So the key things to look at, is it an activated ability? Because that's specifically written out in Yasharn. And then you need to look at where the pay life clause is in relationship to the colon on the card.
So like something like Vampiric Tutor, you're losing life as part of the resolution of the spell. So you can do that one. But something like Force of Will, you're paying life in order to cast it. So you cannot do that one.
Same thing with Mana Confluence. You're paying life in order to be able to get the mana.
Not losing life as a result.
Exactly. Whereas Cydia Brass deals you a damage where it's tapped. You're still able to get the colored mana off of Cydia Brass.
I didn't even realize that, So I think first we should talk about why Yasharn. cEDH is a format where it's defined by your commanders having powerful card draw capabilities or being a combo piece in their own right? So like things like Tymna or Crom or Thrasios that are powerful, cheap draw engines. That's a great cEDH commander. Or combo pieces like Godo or Najeela or Gitrog. Those are also powerful cEDH. But you very rarely see this third option for cEDH commanders, which is a commander that stops most of those things, or some of those things. A Stax piece, a powerful one. There's Lavinia. Lavinia sees a little bit of play, right? But overall, we don't see a lot of Stax pieces in the command zone. It's hard to specifically know what you should be targeting, right?
That's the thing, yeah. Maybe you could argue Ruric Thar. But
Ruric
then
Thar too.
We named two commanders.
Yeah, two. There's not very many, right? Your main ballpark where you want to be is draw engine or combo piece. And the reason that is because Yasharn does shut off a lot, but there are some things that it doesn't shut off at all. And if you're at a table where you're not seeing any of those common things, Yasharn might not do anything. That's one of the bad issues with Stax. But the cEDH meta right now seems like it's moving towards a point. Everyone is getting to a point where now the Flash is gone for a couple months. We're figuring out what the best deck is. So now we know how to attack the best format, right? We know how to attack the best deck, which in my opinion is a Grixis, Consultation, Brain Freeze, Underworld Breach deck.
I would agree. I also think that's
probably
the best thing you could be doing right now.
The best thing that you can be doing. And Yasharn stops a lot of the things that are involved in that core strategy, which is why I think it might be a good option. We're not sure, right? We don't know for sure. It could be a complete dud, but maybe. We'll see.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I want to talk about is the card advantage of Yasharn.
Yeah, so surprisingly, being able to get two basic lands is really nice.
Yeah.
In this deck, it works really well with a lot of the Stax pieces that you're playing. Being able to consistently have land drops when you have things like Winter Orb or Static Orb out just allows you to keep powering out more Stax pieces and more threats onto the board, even under your own other Stax pieces as well.
Right, and you're playing a lot of Thalia type effects too,
exactly.
Right? So you're slowing everyone down. So if you can ensure that you're hitting your land base into the you can hit your land drops into the late game, it can kind of allow you to really take over in that late game. And then Yasharn's also big kind of secret method of card advantage, I think, is slowing down the card advantage of your opponents.
That's also true.
So if your opponents can't draw cards at the same rate, they can't use Necropotence, for example, or something else. You know what I mean? They can't get ahead. They can't use their treasures to get ahead on mana, so you're slowing them down on mana. They can't use their fetch land. So like if you're slowing their advantage down, you are kind of secretly, quietly gaining advantage yourself.
Exactly, yeah. And there's not a lot of instant speed interaction in a deck like this, but you don't really need it because the stuff that you're able to put on board is what is doing the interacting.
Right, you're trying to stop any of that interaction. We are playing a couple. There's maybe 10 or so interactions. There's some that you Veil of Summer. You have to play Veil of Summer.
You gotta play them,
It's just too good, especially in a deck without counterspells. Veil of Summer gets way better, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
But before we go too much further, I think we should talk about what specifically Yasharn stops, because it is a lot, and it's, I think, good to know the things that it does stop going into any of these conversations.
Exactly, yeah.
So go ahead.
So we went through, well, Dylan went through the Playing with Power cEDH staples list, and he found all of the things that Yasharn stops on that list, and it is a surprisingly large amount of things.
Yeah, so let's go over just from the top all of the things that cause you that Yasharn shuts off. So Culling the Weak.
Sacrificing a creature.
Fire Covenant.
Losing life.
Force of Will.
Losing life to cast it for free.
Limdul's Vault.
Also paying life every single time you get a new 5.
Now, these next three, Mental Misstep, Gitaxian Probe, and Noxious Revival, this is really just because you can't use Phyrexian mana when Yasharn is out.
Yeah, you can still cast them, but you're just not able to cast them for free.
Right, Peak is not a very good card, so that difference there is pretty significant, but they can still cast those spells, but it slows them down. So you start right from the get-go, even with those little things, you slow them down. Plunge into Darkness.
Actually, both modes of Plunge into Darkness get shut off because one is a sacrifice and one is a life pay.
Yeah, so Plunge is completely worthless.
Exactly.
Necropotence.
Also paying life for cards.
So Smothering Ties, it doesn't stop it entirely. You still make the treasures.
But you just can't sacrifice them for any value.
So they're not good. You can get Yasharn, and then maybe you'll have a buildup of treasures that you can use in between Yasharn casting, but another thing that Yasharn does well is it gets you the land, so you can recast Yasharn pretty regularly.
Yeah, exactly. Especially because it's the extra 2 lands that you need for the command text.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really nice. And one of the big things that I saw Yasharn being able to do is a 4/4 is actually a pretty good blocker.
It's a big butt.
You can stop Timna. You can stop Najila. You can stop a lot of things, and oftentimes trading Yasharn for something else is a good deal. You trade them for their resource, and then you just get to cash Yasharn again because you have the lands for it, and you get more lands. You bring it out ready, guy.
All right, what other cards can we do?
Transmute Artifact.
Another sacrifice effect.
Yep. Toxic Deluge.
That's paying life to kill creatures. Can't do that anymore.
All of the fetch lands.
Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, you name them.
Mana Confluence.
Also paying life for mana.
Spire of Industry is just another land that works the same way as Mana Confluence.
You can still make colorless mana off of it, at least.
The Horizon lands.
Also, something that you can't do is pay life for that mana.
Yep.
I think you can still sacrifice it, though.
I think you can still sacrifice it to draw cards, so it's not completely dead, but it doesn't tap for mana.
Which is why you need that.
Yeah, that's what Yasharn, you want to be shutting off their mana as much as possible. If your opponents don't have mana, then they can't win the game, and that means that you can win the game. Dockside Extortionist.
Best creature in the format?
Yeah, that's the main one. That's the key. Like Smothering Tithe, you can still make the treasures. You just can't do anything with them. And Dockside is... A lot of decks are kind of built around Dockside right now. All the Ad Nauseam decks are playing cards like Unsubstantiate.
Yeah.
And Winds of Rebuke. Cards to bounce their... Snap. Cards to bounce their Dockside and cast them again.
And we were just saying how these Grixis shells with Consultation and Underworld Breach combos are the best thing to be doing. And all of these decks are running Dockside Extortionist.
Right.
It's just too good.
Hope of Girapur.
Another one that sacrifices to be able to prevent your opponents from casting non-creature spells.
Yep, you can still get in with Timna and draw some cards, but you can't do the real thing that Hope is there for. Razaketh, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah, no more tutors with Razaketh. You can have an 8/8, that's fine.
Yeah, but 8/8 is not very good. Lotus Petal.
Lotus Petal, yeah, more mana. Ranger Captain of Eos as well.
Ranger Captain of Eos. You can tutor for a 1-drop, but you can't sacrifice it to pop off your little silence effect with Ranger, which is that's pretty significant. And then the big one, Lion's Eye Diamond.
Yeah, Lion's Eye Diamond. Another one of these awesome combo pieces with the Underworld Breach.
Right.
Preventing people from being able to officially go off with that is really another huge upside to Yasharn being in the command zone. That's the other thing, is that not having to worry about it in your 99 and having to green suns for 4 to try to get it out.
Yeah, you don't have to find it in the right matchups. You just always have access to it.
And just shutting off these effects for the entirety of the game from turn 2 or turn 3 sometimes even is so nice to just allowing you to be able to get all of the advantage instead of your opponent.
Let's actually go into the actual cards of the list. Let's talk about the theory of Yasharn. In theory, he's good if you're putting against the right opponent, but let's talk about the actual cards that are going in the list. The list that we're going to be talking about is a little bit different than the one that was on the first showing of Yasharn on the channel, because I've realized there were some options that I wanted to include, some combo pieces that I wanted to remove. So we're going to talk about some of those changes right now.
Yeah. So let's first talk about what this deck is doing to win the game.
To win the game,
we've said 1,000 times that it is stacks, and we are trying to stack people out, but you can't just try to hit everyone with 120 damage off of your Yasharn.
Right. You do have to be able to somehow show, you have to get your opponents to submit, basically.
Exactly.
The main way that you're winning in this game is submission. With this deck is submission. I did in the original version. I know, it sounds kind of bad. The main way is, though, your opponents are going to scoop. That's how you're going to beat them most of the time. Sometimes you'll be able to show them how there's lethal on board in like 2 or 3 turns, or maybe just right now you'll be able to crack them with big Elishnorn beats. But a lot of the times you're just going to lock your opponents out of the game, hopefully, and then they'll just concede.
Now, there's a couple of hard locks that are in this this new version of the deck.
Originally, I had Squirrel Nest and Earthcraft combo in this deck. It's probably one of the better like green-based combos.
Especially for a Stax deck that doesn't necessarily need to win that turn. You can survive a whole other turn cycle if needed so that you can win on your following turn.
Exactly, and especially a deck that the commander shuts off Toxic Deluge, which
That's
is the weakest thing. What that Earthcraft combo is weakest to is Toxic Deluge or Cyclonic Wrath or something like that, right? But you're making a billion 1/1s and then passing the turn, or ideally you're really making a billion 1/1s on someone's end step, so the Toxic Deluge, you could dodge that there too. But there are ways to get around that. There's too many things, and I didn't want any dead pieces in Yasharn. When I'm building decks, I'm really trying to remove as many dead pieces as possible. And when you're in a Stax deck, you really can't afford a bad draw, right? All of your pieces have to be so perfectly timed out to completely shut your opponents down at the right time. So if your opening hand has like an Earthcraft, and if you can go for the combo early, you don't really have many ways to protect it. You don't really have many ways to recover from it. So you really can't even afford those quick wins. So you need the wins to come on turn 10.
I don't know why I gave thumbs up for that in that case.
So let's actually let's talk about what the win conditions that I've left in this deck are, and they're all hard locks.
They're all hard locks, yeah. So there's a hard lock that prevents your opponents from casting any more spells for the rest of the game in Knowledge Pool, and then either Draenith Magistrate or Rule of Law.
Yeah, or maybe like a Rule of Law effect. Some of them like Deafening Silence. They'll still be able to cast some things like creatures or something like that, but they won't be able to cast any non-creatures. So what Draenith Magistrate says is your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. And Knowledge Pool says when it enters, you imprint it, and when it enters, you imprint, and each player exiles the top 3 cards of their library. And then whenever they cast a spell from their hand, which is the only place they're allowed to with Draenith Magistrate out, they exile that spell, and then they can cast one of the cards imprinted with Knowledge Pool. But Draenith Magistrate says that, no, you can't. You can only cast from your hand.
So you just have all these cards sitting there in exile now with Knowledge Pool.
And you can't do them.
Exactly. They can't do anything.
And same thing with Rule of Law. Rule of Law says you can only cast 1 spell a turn. So you cast your 1 spell, and Knowledge Pool exiles it and says, no, cast one of these other spells. And Rule of Law says, no, you've already cast 1 spell. No more spells for you. So what this does is it locks your opponents out from casting any spells. Now, if you're facing against like a Nagila, maybe that's not good enough. But a lot of the times you'll have a 4/4 in play, and the 4/4 will make it so that it's good enough.
Exactly, yeah. And then from there, your opponents can't do anything to get back into the game. You can only keep putting things onto your board.
Right, you can still cast spells.
Exactly.
You can cast more. You have 30 creatures in the deck, so eventually you'll just cast all your creatures and you just attack them to death.
So you just, and overwhelm your opponents.
Right, and eventually once your opponents say, oh, I can't cast any more spells, and I have like a couple mana dorks out, and they see Yasharn is just like a board full of like 2-power flyers and, stuff like that, they'll just concede. They'll scoop it up.
Yeah, but like you said, this situation is very board dependent.
Right.
Because if you are too far behind on board by the time you get this combo going, which can happen. I mean, Knowledge Pool is a 6-mana artifact. It's a very
and you have no
clunky
ways to
piece.
tutor for it.
That's
a bummer, right?
Enlightened Tutor.
Enlightened Tutor. Yeah, that's true. You have Enlightened Tutor, but very few minimal ways to tutor for a 6-drop artifact in green.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not Clunky. Clunky is the best word
clunky,
for it.
right? It's hard to find, but that's not the only lock. There are other locks that you can find.
My favorite one's next.
The best one is Living Plane and Elishnorn.
Oh, man.
This will make it so that your opponents have no more lands and can't play lands anymore either.
Well, they can. They'll just immediately
die
go
right
to the
away.
graveyard due to state-based effects.
Right, so Living Plane is a 4-mana enchantment that says treat all lands in play as both lands and 1/1 creatures.
This is the alpha text, by the way.
Right, yeah. They may not be tapped the first turn they are brought into play. This is probably the better wording, the Oracle text now.
But basically, every single land in play is a one-way. It's a Dryad Arbor,
Right,
basically.
yeah,
And
then
with Elishnorn coming in, saying that your creatures, your 1/1 lands, now have +2/+2. Your opponent's lands have -2/-2. It's an Armageddon. It's a permanent Armageddon.
Right, basically a
state-based
permanent
effect.
Armageddon. And not only that, you'll have, like Cameron said, you have a board of 3/3s. So you'll be able to say, not only do you all have no lands, but I have 3/3s, and I'm going to, whatever your life total is, eventually I'm just going to beat you down. And a lot of players will just scoop to that.
You probably have 6 or 7 3/3s out at this point by now.
As well as a couple mana dorks and some other stacks pieces. By this time, you have to remember that you also have other stacks pieces in play, right? You have Archon of Ameria. You have, you
Love
have
that one.
Thalia effects. So you have other stacks pieces that are more stopping your opponents from playing anything. And then this is just like the hard lock to put the nail in the coffin.
Exactly. The last hard lock that's in the deck prevents your opponents from being able to tap anything for mana anymore. So it essentially cuts them out of the game. Not necessarily the same way that like Drenith Magistrate, Rule of Law, and Knowledge Pool would be able to do, but this is still a really good option if, let's say, your Knowledge Pool is dealt with as well.
Right. So that's Living Plane with Linvala and Collector Oof or Null Rod or something like that. This means that your creature lands cannot be tapped because of Linvala. All your lands are creatures, and they can't be tapped because of Linvala. So your opponents can't tap their lands for any mana, and then Collector Oof and Null Rod will stop their artifacts for being able to tap for any mana.
So
they can't make mana anymore.
Exactly. Now, this does not get around things like Carpet of Flowers.
If they Carpet of Flowers, Dark Ritual, they can make some mana that way, but that's
what's
going to be
nice is that Carpet of Flowers is not going to affect you as the
you don't have any
player.
islands, right? Yeah,
yeah.
So those are the main hard locks in the deck. That's really, as of right now, that's the only way that I have to win in this deck. You could put the Earthcraft combo back in there. There's a couple ways to tutor for enchantments and stuff like that in green-white. But I felt that I didn't want to be drawing Earthcraft late in the game when I don't have the Squirrel Nest or anything. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to make sure.
Squirrel Nest on its own is just a terrible card to have in your hand.
Right, exactly. And out of all those cards, Knowledge Pool is a 6-drop dead card. I will give you that, I admit. But all of the other cards are really powerful stacks pieces and lock pieces,
yeah.
right? They're powerful on their own. I want to kind of go through the entire list. Let's go through every card in the list, talk about my decisions on why they're good. Some of these should come out. Your meta, you have to decide for yourself. This is a stacks deck, so it's very meta dependent.
That's
Your
the
meta,
thing.
some of these things, Rest in Peace, might not be any good. I mean, we're assuming that we're in the Grixis field.
Rest
so
in Peace is
pretty
probably going to be very good if you're playing this deck.
but some of the pieces might
But
not be
still,
any good.
yeah.
So let's just go from the top alphabetically, starting with creatures. Not really alphabetically, kind of like a CMC. Anyway, you understand.
Yeah.
First one, Allosaurus Shepard. I think this is an incredible new tool for green decks.
If you're especially a green creature-based deck
Right.
that needs to win off of a green combo, then this is something you need.
Yeah, definitely. It protects a lot of your spells, and it also makes your elves huge in the late game. If you're a deck like this one who's actually looking to win with combat damage a lot of the times, sometimes speeding up that clock a couple times and making your 3-mana dorks into 3 5/5s, you can crack someone twice and they're dead. You know what I mean? So Allosaurus Shepard is good in the late game and also good at protecting a lot of your spells.
I don't think we necessarily need to talk about every single mana dork that's in here, but just about every mana dork in
Everyone
green
that
that you can play
Yeah.
in this format, in these colors, is going to be in this deck. This is your main source of
Arbor Elf, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Burrow Druid, Elvish Mystic, Funhorn Elves, Llanowar Elves, and Bloom Tender, as well as Priestess of Titania.
Yeah, so this is going to be your main way to ramp outside, because you are playing, we already talked about the Collector Oof and Stony Silence.
So you're trying to shut off artifacts. So you're not playing too many artifact ramp on your own. There's some that you just Soul Ring's too good.
Why would you
have
not
to play it.
play
You know what I
that?
mean?
Yeah.
But you're playing minimal artifact ramp and mainly creature ramp, and then also just like slow play all of your, like, don't miss a land drop because you have Yasharn. That's kind of your ramp, right?
Sylvan Safekeeper I thought was a really cool include in this deck.
Great protection. Since you're getting more lands, you can afford to get rid of a land, and since you're in green-white, your interaction is minimal, so you need to be able to protect your stuff.
This is a good way to do that. Collector Oof we've talked about already. That card is so good. Destiny Spinner's another great addition here too, just making your Yasharn uncounterable and a lot of your other creature. Really, because it hits enchantments too, a lot of your other enchantment-based Stax pieces now can just come down. You don't have to worry about Force of Wills or negations or anything like that.
Real quick, another enchantment that is protected, Luminar Ascension, which actually should be listed as a win con in this deck. Once you lock the game up enough, you can pump out a whole bunch of 4/4 angels. It seems like it's a stretch, and sometimes it is, but if you're really trying to lock the game down as much as possible, a bunch of angels will get the job done.
And having all that extra Yasharn mana is able to
exactly
help pump out some more, too.
We've talked about Drannith Magistrate, one of the best new hate bears that we have access to. On its own, it's fantastic. In this deck, it's part of a win condition.
Aethysworn Cannon is just another kind of rule of law effect that you could replace rule of law or Drannith Magistrate and have this pair up with Knowledge Pool. Again, there are still ways that people are able to cast like one spell.
Right. But it's very limiting at that point. If you have an Aethysworn Canonist out and they, and a Knowledge Pool, they can cast basically nothing.
Exactly.
Fauna Shaman helps you dig for more creatures and get the right ones at the right time.
We'll come across its enchantment cousin in just a little bit here.
Grand Abolisher is obviously another one that's necessary. It's great to just make sure that you can go for what you need to go for and protect your stuff. Hushbringer has a couple of Nombos. It's not great with Yasharn specifically, and it's not great with one or two other things stopping ETB and dying triggers. But I just thought it was this is a new include from the first showing that we have.
If you're not familiar, it's a 2-mana 1/2 flyer with lifelink that is a Torpor Orb.
Torpor Orb, yeah, but also for dying, which
That's
Torpor
true.
Orb isn't. Which
I always forget that about
so
this
Blood
card
Artist,
too.
it stops a lot. There are some negative synergies, but I think it's important enough to stop the Hostage Oracle, because now when someone's trying to go for Oracle, they have to get rid of your Hushbringer and then go for it, which it gives enough time. Right?
Another thing that stops off Dockside too, just by preventing the treasures from being made.
I think Hushbringer is a great card. You have to. There's a couple cards that I kind of removed because I'm like, I don't want too much, dissynergy. What's the word for dissynergy?
That's it.
Unsynergies?
No.
Dissynergies.
Unsynergistic.
You don't want too many unsynergistic things in your deck, but I mean, it stops Yasharn. That's a real thing. But it's yours, right? So you can time it out. You can play your Yasharn first and then play Hushbringer.
Exactly, yeah. You have that prior knowledge. Spirit of the Labyrinth, another amazing effect. If you thought that Narset Part of the Veils is great, you're going to love a 2-mana 3/1 version of it, especially one that can get pumped by Elesh Norn, because that's relevant.
Right, yeah. You're not drawing a ton of cards in this deck, so stopping your opponents from doing so is a way to get yourself some card advantage.
Yasharn still gets around it as well from being able to search and put into your hand, too.
Yep, so you're still kind of drawing those lands, even though you're not really drawing.
Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, is the Stax piece. The Stax piece that you see everywhere.
Although, to be fair, I think some people might argue on what a Stax piece is, or if this is just not really. Some people think that the Stax piece have to lock you out of something, not just put a taxing effect on it, right? But I consider this in the arena of Stax effect.
This is a Stax effect, especially because it hits the deck that we're trying to hit with this deck, which is the Grixis stuff. All the Grixis stuff that are trying to cast multiple spells a turn just get so much more expensive that way. And if you decide that you want to play even more Thalia effects, like the Vryn Wingmare, and then that other 2/1 for 3 from whatever the
there's
fuck
a couple
set that
options.
was.
Yeah, there's a couple options that you can add to this Thalia effect if that's your style. I only have a couple of them in here, but you could definitely add more, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Archon of Ameria, another great new card.
Perfect. It's a Rule of Law effect, which is great for your Knowledge Pool locks, and it also has a Root Maze attached to it as well on a flying body. So what's great with Elesh Norn, it's great to show that, sometimes you'll have the hard lock out, but everyone will have a board full of creatures. If you can say, I have a flyer, can you guys just scoop? I'm just going to attack you for the next 40 turns, and they'll say, oh yeah, we can't cast spells, there's a flyer on board. Yep, we're dead.
Speaking of flyers on board that everyone forgets about sometimes, even Mind Sensor.
Obviously, just a staple of the format, necessary include. Manglehorn, one of my favorite ones, because not only the ETB, again, shut off by Hushbringer, just one card though, no big deal, but having your opponent's artifacts come in tapped, huge. Great for stopping ad nauseum turns. If they're going to ad nauseum, they're going to want to play a bunch of rocks, those rocks are coming in tapped.
So they're not able to just win the game off of a big pure into the abyss.
Right, exactly. So you really shrink those storm turns abilities.
Runic Armasaur. I love this card, and I really wish it got to see more play. So
this is a
thank
great
God
home
we
for
shoved it into here.
Yeah, great way to draw cards.
It's certainly not a Stax piece in its sense, but when you're in these colors, you'll take what you can for card draw.
Yeah, you need a couple cards that can just help you actually accrue actual advantage for yourself and find some of the combo pieces that are maybe hard to tutor for.
Because we're a creature deck, Yasharn the Wanderer Bard is fantastic. This
Don't need
really
to say much about that.
It helps you get up through your chain so that you can get to your hard locks much faster.
Helps you find Elesh Norn. Yeah, it's just Yasharn's a great include. Linvala, part of those stacks pieces, part of shutting off your opponent's mana.
Let's be clear, this is the Keeper of Silence. This is not the 6-mana one from when we came back to Zendikar the first time. I knew you were all confused about that. We're not making a 3/3 Angel.
Right. We would love to play cheaper effects of this that affects everyone's activated abilities, but we're playing just too many mana dorks and Yasharn effects, and it wouldn't work. So Linvala is great at stopping everyone else's activated abilities.
Oakham Adversary is a great include for more card draw effects, and paying it for 2 mana, it feels like cheating.
Yep. It's just more card draw. Orin Frostfang is another one. It just allows you to draw more cards. These are like Orin Frostfang, Oakham Adversary, and Runic Armasaur are all kind of like, I want to say new-ish. Maybe Frostfang's not that new, but it's still within the past 5 years of these like green creatures that allow you, like these Timna effects that allow you to get through and draw cards. I think that's necessary for this deck.
And it's a good way for green to draw, too, because a lot of times green's card draw has been based upon the power of creatures you control.
Right, which is no good for
sacrificing a
cEDH.
creature and then drawing something else, too, like in Greater Good. So being able to, and that's what this deck wants to do. It wants to attack, so it really incentivizes you even more so.
Yeah, exactly. You're winning with combat damage, so you want to get your beats in early.
This is another new addition, then Archon of Valor's Reach.
I just think this card is so good. I can't believe I missed it in the first rendition.
It is. It's just...
It's Flying Vigilance Trample,
there's so
5/6
much stuff that
for
it
6
does,
mana, and when it enters, you get to choose a card type. Players can't cast that card type anymore. If you name Instance, your cEDH opponents are going to be dead.
No,
they can't do anything.
They can't do anything about it. Yeah, in the right meta, creature's another good thing to name too.
Yeah, it's flexible. I mean, it's huge. It's 6 mana. It's huge. It's going to have a big target on its head.
But it's always going to block. It's always going to attack.
Right.
No matter what's going on, and that's kind of the situation you get yourself into with this.
Yeah,
deck.
and it's great like Yasharn towards the end. If you start building up Yasharn a little bit, and if you can go like end step, get Archon, untap, get Elishnorn, your opponents are dead. Obviously, a lot of hoops that you have to go through to make that happen. But.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last creature is one that we haven't talked about yet. Elishnorn grants in the fight.
Yeah, Elishnorn is the reason to play this deck. I think it's the most powerful effect. I mean, it's slow. It's a 7 mana creature, which feels silly to be talking about in cEDH, the
really
format
does,
that's decided on turn 3. But if you can get this out, a lot of your opponents aren't going to be able to do anything about it. All the ones that are relying on mana dorks can't do anything. Najila, dead. A lot of them are dead. It won't affect everyone, but with Living Plane out, it will affect everyone.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's really quickly go over the sorceries. Green Sun Zenith and Finale of Devastation.
You need them. They're
great tutors.
Creature tutors.
And Finale of Devastation also great in the late game when you want to pump it for 10 and just naturally kill your opponents. You can do that. Idyllic Tutor helps you find some enchantments.
Weirdly enough, its name implies that it's the best tutor in the deck,
It's the
but
ideal
it's
tutor.
really the worst tutor in the deck.
Yeah, this was the deck used to play Earthcraft, and it was a little bit better then. This one can still find stuff like Luminar Ascension or Survival of the Fittest if you're just bulked up
or
on
your
too many
Living
wonders.
Plane, too.
Or Living Plane. It can find some stuff, but it's an inefficient combo. You just kind of have to play because you're in green-white, I think.
And then 2 things that are sorceries but also double as lands then, Amelia's Call and Turntimber Symbiosis.
Yeah, we have a low land count right now in this deck, only 27 lands, but really we have 29 lands because we're playing these 2. These are new additions that I didn't have in the first iteration. I'm not 100% on them, but they just seem like kind of free.
For this deck in particular, because again, we're getting ourselves into these big board stall out states, so being able to just look at the top 7 cards of your library, put a Stax piece into play with 3+1/+1 counters on it to beat Morpheus is nice.
Yeah.
Or even just putting 2 4/4 angels that are going to kill your opponent over the long terms is also cool. And you were telling me today even that this creatures you control gain indestructible until your next turn clause does come up. It is. I'll admit, it is not the most relevant thing.
Yeah.
Like it,
but it's going to come up when your opponents, when you want to get through some damage or you want to make sure that you can profitably block, you need to be able to, I'm just going to chump, they have a Razaketh that they can't tutor anything with, but it's an 8/8 flyer that's coming through a lot. Okay, I'm going to be able to put my Aven Mind Sensor in front of it, keep it alive, and then untap Elishnorn. And you know what I mean? Like, it gives you those opportunities to claw your way out of situations that could have normally been tough.
This is also a great counter to Razaketh, too, because it's still the same stats for 1 less mana.
Yeah, you can trade the 4/4 angels you can trade with Razaketh. It's just situation, right?
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special news bulletin.
Yeah, we have tokens. This is a long podcast. We're going to take a real quick break, but we have tokens. We'd like to, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. You got to take control of this. You got to start. You got to just say.
Hey, guys. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. You ever... Has this ever happened to you?
It's a Halloween. There's supposed to be like a Halloween token pack. So we could say like,
true.
Ooh, happy Halloween.
Has this ever happened to you? Man, I really need a bird token.
Huh, I don't have one.
Well, look no further.
Happy Halloween. We have a Halloween special of tokens. You can buy them on our website. Patrons can buy them for 3 for $5, but for everyone else, $2 a token.
We added Tyler to the mix this time. He's available as a bird.
You know Tyler.
He's in the show.
He's the guy on the top left.
So
He's a great guy.
make sure that you check out playtowinmtg.com. These will be available for patrons. You can get all 3 in a pack for $5. Otherwise, it's $2 each. And there's limited availability, so get them while they're hot. Make them rain. These are ones we're sending out, so I hope you enjoy the damaged corners.
Let's go over some of the interactions, the instants in the deck. Autumn Veil and Veil of Summer. I think these are, you're in green. You need
These
to be
are
playing
your
them.
green counter spells.
Yep.
Yeah, Veil of Summer is Cryptic Command for 1 mana.
Yeah, exactly.
Autumn's Veil is just like counter spell for 1 mana. It's still really good.
And you're also playing Silence, of course, because
Another
necessary
counterspell.
interaction.
Yeah.
Some tutor we have Enlightened Tutor, which is obviously very important when we're looking for Knowledge Pool and some other stacks pieces that are artifacts and enchantments. Nature's Claim and Force of Vigor, great at getting rid of artifacts and enchantments. Eladamri's Call, Unworldly Tutor, just more tutors that are efficient and we need to be playing them. And we're playing Swords to Plowshare and Path to Exile as just a little bit. You don't see Path very often, but
You really don't, but I mean, when you... The format's pretty creature-based still. It's still pretty creature-based.
There are creatures. I mean, I don't know how relevant they are to removal, but there are going to be times when you're going to need to get something out of the way. And since you're a green-white, you don't have counterspells, so you just need to have as many cheap interactions that can impact the board in some way.
Path is still good. A lot of people still don't play a lot of basics either.
Right, and
too,
you're playing
so.
Aven Mindset, so sometimes you can feel real smart, right?
Yeah, you can
That's
get them
nice.
that way, too.
The artifacts in the deck, Chalice of the Void. This one is one that I don't see often, but I really like it right now.
If this is an awesome stacks piece, if you get Chalice down on 1, let's just take a moment to think about how many blue 1-drops
like a
people
third
play.
of the format.
A third of people's decks a lot of the time.
Right,
Or
everyone's
blue
playing 1, 2, and
spells
3
that
drops, and
cost
that's it.
1 mana. So just being able to get like, oh my
Yeah,
god, and off of like a mana crypt too.
Right, yeah.
With this, like this is just
You
Chalice
can-
the Void
if you
is
get
so good.
Mana Crypt, turn 1 Chalice on 1, that's gonna shut off a lot of decks, right? It's gonna be very, very powerful. And at the one point in this deck, Sanctum Prelate was also in the deck. So if you could
Yeah.
have a Chalice on 1, Sanctum on 2, your opponents are dead, right? I took Sanctum out, but it's definitely still in. It should be in the considering pile for this deck.
Definitely, yeah. There are a couple of mana rocks. We did say that they're not necessarily your main source of mana here, but these cards are too good at being able to power out Yasharn a lot faster. Being able to put even 2 mana dorks into play on turn 1 is super nice.
Yeah,
So
in my mind, this is like the power 4 of CEDH, Chrome Mox, Mana Crypt, Mox Diamond, and Soul Ring. These artifacts are just too good to not play them, in my opinion. There are some decks that maybe you could justify cutting Chrome Mox or Mox Diamond. I think Soul Ring and Mana Crypt belong in every single deck, no matter what. You start with those two. And then Chrome Mox and Mox Diamond, I think, belong in like 99% of every deck after that.
now we do have a couple of artifact stack pieces as well, including Null Rod, which we've talked about so far.
But if I'm turn 1 Soul Ring into Null Rod, I don't care if I can't use that Soul Ring anymore.
no, because
It's
that
so
Null
great.
Rod is going to be so much better for you than it is bad for you.
Exactly. Yep.
Sphere of Resistance is another Thalia type effect, except it hits all spells instead of just non-creatures.
Yep.
And it's harder to remove too.
We have Winter Orb and Static Orb, and ways to just shut off your opponent's mana, make sure that they can't untap as many things, as many resources. It makes the end step Adnaz, untap, try to win much more difficult.
Definitely does, yeah. It's certainly not as optimal as it is in like Urza, but still shuts
You can't
off.
you can't turn off yourself. You're still gonna have to deal with it.
But again, Yasharn being able to go get you more basic lands just allows you to still be casting spells through Static and Winter Orb too.
And it's your deck, so you can decide when to play it. Sometimes you can look at it in your opening hand and go, I'm just not going to play that this game. I'm on Secret Mulligan to 6, and that's okay.
And then when it's relevant, you
drop it. Because it's in your hand, you decide when to play it, so you decide when it's good or not.
Tangle Wire, we've seen be very good, which is a card that still surprises me is very good in this format, but there's a lot of times where, if you're behind and your opponent slams down a Tangle Wire, you are
dead.
staying
You're
behind.
so dead. That's the best part about Tangle Wire is it makes it impossible to catch up. If your opponents are some mulligans, if they go to 6, they can't catch up.
Oh
with
my
Tangle
god!
Wire.
If you're on the play and you have Tangle Wire turn 2, like that's not. I wouldn't necessarily do that. I would wait for my opponents to have more things to tap down.
Right. But the best thing about this deck is a lot of these decks are doing nothing, and then they're dumping everything, right?
Exactly,
so if they're doing like kind of like, maybe you get a land artifact, and nothing. If you get that early Tangle Wire out, they have to tap 4 things, which is all of their stuff. Whereas you have a bunch of creatures, you have a bunch of stuff that you can tap, extra lands,
including
you're
the
getting
Tangle
with
Wire
Yasharn,
itself.
including the Tangle Wire, so you can break parity on this one pretty easily because you're just going to have more permanence than your opponents will.
Exactly. It's a lot worse in the late game, I will say.
Yep.
Definitely a lot worse in the late game,
But it's helpful at buying you like 3 turns.
Exactly,
Right? It's helpful at just like buying you like from like turn 5 to 7, 8, 9. You can like really buy those turns with Tangle Wire, which is really when the players are going to be trying to win the most. So you can go ahead.
Oh, I was sorry. I was just going to say that it also combos very well with like your Thalia effects too.
Right.
Because people are, getting themselves into situations where they're tapping lands and artifacts, and now it's costing even more mana to cast spells. You already had to tap everything. You're still not able to cast your stuff.
Exactly. And Tangle Wire can kind of act like it's a Thalia effect, but for 4 the first time, and then for 3, and then for 2. And that's still pretty good. Your opponents have to pay 4 more mana to cast something. How do they get ahead? How do they progress their board?
I'm surprised we had so much to say about Tangle Wire.
Yeah,
honestly.
it's a unique card because I think Tangle Wire does a lot to the game, and I think it's a kind of skill-intensive card as to when you play it.
Yeah, I agree.
Trinisphere.
Not a skill-intensive card. Slam it down. Everyone hates it.
So I have actually had some not so great experiences with Trinisphere where there will be times where you'll play a Trinisphere and then the person after you will have 6 mana and can go for Thassa's Oracle Consultation, and then nobody else can cast their Force of Will because they didn't realize the Trinisphere was coming or something like that.
That being said, I still think the pros outweigh the cons.
Pros outweigh the cons. Just make sure you are aware of the board state when you're playing Trinisphere. And I think that goes for all of these Stax pieces. Stax is a difficult style of deck to play because you have to play the right thing that's going to shut off as many opponents as possible at the right time. And if you missequence some of your things, you can give the game to somebody else. And that's
even
the
without
worst
knowing it right then and there.
Right.
It's a small advantage.
Right.
And that's the thing, because you're expanding the game to its maximum length. There's more
More decision
times
points
that you could make the wrong decision then too.
Right. There's more decision
tough.
points, so there's more times that you can make the wrong decision, it can become very beneficial to be able to politic with your opponent, to be able to talk with them, to be able to say, hey, I got a Trinisphere, but I'm afraid if I do that this guy's going to win and you can't stop him. Is that true? You know what I mean? You can talk to your opponents and feel out, okay, I think player B, I think she has a Force of Will, and I think he has a Spell Pierce, so I'm going to play this Trinisphere. You know what I mean? Like, you can make it to a point where you can play Puppet Master on your opponents and say, I have this Trinisphere, but I won't play it. If you can protect him, I'll play this other thing instead.
I just hope that they don't counter your Trinisphere instead.
Yeah, exactly. And then Knowledge Pool, we've talked about that. One of the main win conditions of this deck, the axis of the hard lock. I could see a reason for taking this out and we're going for the Earthcraft, but I just think the hard lock with Drannith Magistrate is just so interesting to
and
me.
because
so
there's so many cards that work with the Knowledge Pool.
Right. All of the rule of law effects, and in my opinion, those rule of law effects, those are the best Stax pieces that we can find right now, is the rule of law effects. So being able to combo with them, great. I mean, not combo, hard lock, right? But it's
a combo. That's a combo. It's a 2-card combo.
It results in you winning the game, just not as deliberately as the other ones. Not right now.
Exactly.
I win the game 3 turns from now.
Sometimes 12.
Sometimes 12, or sometimes 1. You know what I mean? It depends if you have big enough creatures. All right, let's go over now to enchantments.
So Carpet of Flowers is one of the best ramp spells in the format.
Gotta play it.
Deafening Silence also works with Knowledge Pool, like we did say before.
They can still play a creature or something like that.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily your perfect hard lock, but it's a pretty hard lock. It's a medium, half flaccid lock.
Right.
Oh,
jeez.
Root Maze.
Root Maze is a good one.
So good on turn 1 and so bad on turn 10.
Yes. Yeah. But it also works very nicely with a lot of the other things, right? The artifacts and the lands coming in tapped. Sometimes they're going to play a fetch land, and the Root Maze will come in and tapped, and then they'll untap it. And then if Yasharn isn't out, they fetch for another tap land. Or if Yasharn is out, they can't even do anything with their tap fetch land. So you can really just make their mana impossible.
Really shuts them out. Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth both combo very awesomely with Arbor Elf.
And just, more ramp, more spread out your ramp a little bit.
Exactly. Not susceptible to Toxic Deluges or Fire Covenants either.
Even though Yasharn shuts those things off.
Yasharn shut those off, but like Wrath of God still
good. Every once in a while we see a Damnation.
Exactly. Kenrith's Transformation is another way for you to interact with creatures.
With commanders specifically. I think this is a great removal spell that it acts as if you think about it as a stacks piece, it's like the perfect stacks piece for one deck, right? If someone's playing Gitrog and for some reason they don't win as soon as they play Gitrog, and you play Kendra's Transformation on them, their deck doesn't do anything anymore. To me, that's a stacks piece.
Yeah, and turning it into a 3/3 is hilariously relevant since Yasharn is a 4/4.
Oh, yeah.
They're not able to. A lot of times, like, you give someone your Gilded Drake, and then you have no flyers, and the next thing you know, you're at 12 life because of your own Gilded Drake.
You can still block a 3/3 all day if you want to, but a lot of times you won't want to because you want it to stay alive. You want it to stay enchanted and not go to the command zone.
But being able to replace itself as well, this is
the draw card is
some
nice.
card draw.
I think it's a great underrated piece of removal in green. It gets taken out by other more powerful effects, but I think Kendra's Transformation is a great card.
Exactly. Luminar Ascension. This is the other win condition that we talked about as well. You've seen this on the channel win games too. Luminar Ascension is just an all-around amazing commander card and should be countered if it's on the stack.
Absolutely, and it's a card that is hard to deal with. A lot of times, if you let it resolve, they're probably ready to make a couple angels. So even if you can Nature's Claim it, they can pop off 3 angels, and guess where those angels are coming? Probably at you. So it snowballs so quickly,
so fast.
So this is a great one for the late game to just say that, hey, maybe I don't have lethal on board right now, but if you look, you can convince your opponents I have enough mana to make 12 angels right now, which in 2 turns will kill you all, and you can't play any spells. So you'll be able to just wrap up the game more quickly.
And we saw this work really well when Tyler was hellbent in that game too.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, so like these, especially in this color combination, and a lot of the times in stacks, you just have no cards in your hand because you're just consistently throwing everything down on the board. So being able to still have something that you can do with all of the other lands that you got from Yasharn is another just great reason why even if this card didn't win you the game, you would still play it.
Yeah, and the big thing is it makes it so that the cards that would be in every other player's hand, your cards aren't in your hand. Your cards are on the board, right? So your card, you have a 2 mana 4/4 angel in your hand, but it's not in your hand, it's on the board, right?
Oh, it has flash too. Don't forget it has flash.
Yeah, it has flash. So when your opponents are like this happened, your opponent casts a Notion Thief, Wheel of Fortune, everyone loses their hand, but you still have like 6 creatures, you have the ability to make a bunch of angels, so you losing your hand doesn't really matter. You didn't have anything to lose.
Exactly. Rest in Peace, just another one of the best stacks pieces you could be playing right now, especially against the Grixis shells.
Yep, it stops Underworld Breach. Doesn't stop Thassa's Oracle, obviously, but I think it stops enough. Stony Silence is another Collector Roof. Just this one's on an enchantment.
Arguably better, but you harder to tutor for because it can't be Green Sun Zenith.
Yep, harder to tutor for, but a little bit harder to interact with as well, probably.
Exactly. Here's the cousin. We finally came up to the cousin.
Is this survival of the fittest?
Yeah, the much better Fauna Shaman because you can use it the same turn when you have the extra green mana.
Great at getting rid of a mana dork and finding an Elishnurn when you need to, or vice versa if you're short on mana.
Speaking of, well, I guess we weren't just speaking of card draw, but if you want to draw cards in green, this is how you're going to do it with Sylvan Library.
You need to play it. Aura of Silence.
This is a new one that I noticed you had put in.
Yeah, this one is great at creating tax effects on the artifacts. So if your opponent is going for ad nauseam, playing out those mana rocks afterwards is going to be very hard with Aura of Silence.
Yep.
And it's also it's sneaky removal. It's my favorite type of EDH removal where it stops your opponents for even playing the cards, right? Your opponent might want to play their Birthing Pod, but they're like, there's the Aura of Silence out. I have to wait. Which means that your removal spell is doing something without you having to waste the card on it. That's where you get your advantages in this deck, I think, is just your opponents know they can't do anything, so they don't even bother playing spells. And then you get to keep playing spells, so you get to push ahead.
Rule of Law, we did talk about this card a bunch too. This card just puts in so much work. It puts in so much work. There's most win conditions want you to cast one spell and then another spell. Rule of Law, my mic. Rule of Law shuts that off completely.
Fair Magic. Let's play Fair Magic, which is what you want to be doing.
Draft Magic.
Right. You want to be tapping out for 3 drops and 4 drops and 5 drops every turn. You don't want to be playing these little 1 drops and 2 drops and storming off. You don't want any of that.
And then, weirdly enough, the last non-land we have to talk about is Living Plane, actually.
Yeah, Living Plane is the main focus of the hard locks in this deck. I think it's 4 mana. It's so a little bit more expensive, but you're playing the Yasharn. You want to push to the late game. You can get there.
Exactly, yeah. And it's, making everything 1/1s can be very relevant when you're just trying to beat your opponents down too.
Yep.
Again, with Yasharn, you're consistently getting more lands as well, so you can keep getting more 1/1s with this as well. But this is really a combo piece and should be looked at in your hand as if it's that.
And it's also, it's important to remember, I kind of made this mistake in the game that we played, but it's important to remember that when Living Plane says everyone's lands are 1/1s, if they play a land for turn, they can't tap it right away because it's a creature, it has summoning sickness. So that that it means that all the it's kind of like a root maze, a 4-mana root maze where the lands
same
kind of
time,
come
too,
intact,
yeah.
right? So in its own right, it kind of acts as a stacks piece, which is why I like it so much.
Yeah.
And then for lands, only
There's
27.
some interesting stuff going on in the land slots here. So because Yasharn shuts off fetch lands, even for you, like I can't believe we haven't mentioned this yet. Yasharn is not just for your opponents. Yasharn
too.
is a universal effect.
Yeah, so you have to find a way to break parity on it.
So that means that you don't want to be running a ton of your fetch lands because with Yasharn out, you have more potential to draw dead cards that aren't going to do anything until Yasharn's removed, which is not a scenario you want to be in.
Yeah, so I cut all of the white fetch lands. I kept in the green ones because I still think they're important enough to be able to find your necessary lands or whatever. But I cut a lot of those, and we're only have 27 lands, but
Again, we have the
we're really at 29.
Amelia's Call and Timberwood symbiosis.
Which is going to be a weird way to evaluate decks going forwards because the land count is probably going to start looking smaller and smaller if decks can find a way to include these cards. And then everything else in the land, we're playing a high number of basics because Yasharn can find them, 7 forests, 5 plains, and everything
total.
else is kind of self-explanatory. They're just green-white lands that, Cavern of Souls and some stuff like that.
You get a little bit of tech with like Horizon Canopy and Gaia's Cradle, but
Keep in mind that with Horizon Canopy, though, it's a little bit of an ambo. You can't pay life to make mana with it when Yasharn's out, but it's yours, so you can play around it. And I think having the card draw in green-white, sometimes you just need to stretch for it, right? You just need to have it.
Sometimes you do, yeah. And you can still crack Horizon Canopy for a card with Yasharn out as well.
Exactly.
So even if it got out after Yasharn, it's not dead.
It's still a cantrip, kind
It
of.
places itself, yeah.
So that's Yasharn.
Yasharn.
We went over basically literally every single card in the deck, why we think it's good. But I think the real question is, do you think it's good?
We'd love to know what you think about this. We are very excited to keep testing this deck out in the wild, not just against other Zendikar commanders too, just to see how well this can do. I think this deck does have legs, like we've been saying this whole time. I mean, the thing to beat right now is these Grixis-based Storm and Consultation-based decks, and Yasharn just on so many axes. Axi. On so many axles can take care of everything that those decks are trying to do.
Real quick before we go though, we wanted to do a couple test hands with Yasharn, see if it's any good.
Yeah.
So we're gonna draw a hand. We're gonna put out. Are we drawing a real hand, or are we gonna do a digital hand?
I wanted to.
You just wanted to draw
a hand.
We'll draw a hand. We're gonna decide what our other players at the tables are first, and then what turn order we're going in as well.
Good
right?
call. Okay.
So we're gonna say that table 1, person A is Kess on Kess Storm, Turbo Adnaz, Grixis, Kess Storm. Player 2 is on Nagila, regular tempo Nagila, and player 3 is on
Thrasios.
We'll do Thrasios and. We'll do Thrasios and Tymna.
There we go.
Thrasios and Tymna, TNT. You're not sure what, but it's a TNT, and you're going last, right? We're going last in this pod right now. So we have Kess, Nagila, TNT. We don't know much more than that, but we can assume that these decks are on
Consultations.
on some sort of they're at the most recent levels, and then we're player 4 on Yasharn. So for our first hand, I'm going to click right here. Pow. First hand we have Bountiful Promenade, Grand Abolisher, Static Orb, Forest, Boreal Druid, Rest in Peace, Deafening Silence.
So this hand is actually pretty good. You have a Mana Dork for turn 1. Rest in Peace works really well against your Storm opponents. Deafening Silence also works well against the Storm opponents. Grand Abolisher, not necessarily the best here. Same with Static Orb, but those are 2 cards that I'm definitely interested in later into the game. I think this is a keep.
Yeah, so we have 2 lands. We have the Boreal Druid, so we're at 3 mana right away. I think I'm probably So what are we doing with this hand? There's 2 options. I think the first option is we could do turn 1 Deafening Silence, turn 2 Rest in Peace, or we could do turn 1 Boreal Druid, turn 2 Static Orb.
That was the other thing I was thinking too, and then we can do turn 4 depending on what we draw, into Deafening Silence, Rest in Peace then too.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards turn 1 Promenade into Boreal Druid, and then seeing what our opponents do, seeing if a Static Orb or a Rest in Peace or a Deafening Silence would be most important then. But yeah, I think I would keep this hand. It doesn't have any way to draw cards.
No, which is not great.
But if you find one more land, you can cast a turn 3 Yasharn maybe, look for some extra lands, and having 3 stacks pieces in your opening hand, I think this is a keep.
This is just a really good ratio of everything here.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you may be weak to I'm thinking you may be weak to a Najeela in this hand. You don't have really any removal or any real ways to stop the Najeela, but the Static Orb should shut them back if you get it down quick enough. If they get a turn 1 Najeela, that Static Orb, I don't know, it might not be strong enough, but they might be able to start getting warrior tokens, and maybe those tokens can be tapped. You know what I mean? No, a Static Orb is just land anyway, so it doesn't even, he wouldn't be able to use their lands for that.
Is it?
Yeah, Static Orb is it's permanent.
It's permanent.
Yeah, no. So Static Orb would stop the Najeela.
It would do a really good job. So like they're still able to untap like a land and their Najeela, so that they can still keep attacking that way at least too. But I mean, you're preventing the buildup of tokens from Najeela that way with Static Orb. Okay, Static Orb is a lot more implications than we originally thought in this hand. Still 100% a keeper.
Yeah, I think this one's a keep. All right, so let's go to our next game. Let's should we same pod? This time?
Same pod.
We'll do one more same pod.
Except this time we have a Wooded Bastion, Basic Plains, Basic Forest, Wooded Foothills, Sylvan Library, Hushbringer, and then Finale of Devastation.
What are you doing with this hand?
I am so fucking on the fence with this so far. So you have one Stax piece in this hand. Hushbringer. Sylvan Library is really why I'm attracted to this hand, is because I'll be able to refill pretty quickly here, especially with the sheer amount of lands that this hand started off with. And then Finale, being able to get any Stax piece that we're going to need is still nice.
Yeah.
So this does give you a little bit of flexibility. However, without a way to ramp, it's going to take forever to get to that point with Finale of Devastation. So this hand is realistically just doing a turn 2 Sylvan Library into a turn 3 Hushbringer without knowing what the other cards are.
I don't know if that's good enough.
I don't know if it's
I don't know
good
if I would.
either.
I don't think I would keep this hand. 4 lands, I think, is just too many.
You can
no
guarantee
acceleration.
your turn 4 Yasharn.
But
with
I don't
no
think that's very
acceleration, there's just so much better stuff you could be doing.
Yeah, I think I would send this back. The Hushbringer's nice. We're playing against a bunch of Oracle decks, but yeah, I just don't think that one. I don't think
it's going to matter by the time that you get the Hushbringer down. Yeah.
All right, so let's go to our second 7 in the same pod here for game 2 here. Second 7 is Worldly Tutor, Deafening Silence, Trinisphere, Stony Silence, Archon of Valor's Reach, Cavern of Souls, Luminar Ascension.
Ship it.
We're going to 6. Cavern of Souls is the only land. Can't cast any of the spells with it. Not very good.
Yep.
All right. Let's see what a mulligan to 6 looks like. Forest, Knowledge Pool, Trinisphere, Plains, Ameria's Call, so land, Destiny Spinner, Aven Mind Sensor.
This is another very on the fence hand, but if it's something that you could realistically keep by putting Knowledge Pool on the bottom of your library.
Yeah. Again, though, I don't know. So you have 3-ish lands. Destiny Spinner into Aven Mind Sensor or Destiny Spinner into Trinisphere. I don't think this one's very good either. Yeah. You have too many late game stuff and not enough early disruption.
Is it better than a 5-card hand though? Like looking at this with Knowledge Pool on the bottom, is a 5-card. This is essentially already a 6. I mean, Knowledge Pool already makes.
You're drawing a card in your first turn. I would think I would mulligan this. I don't think you're doing anything impactful enough on the first 2 turns of the game, and I think that's when you need to be doing it.
Boy, let's see what the 5 is going to look like.
So,
you're going to be
let's start with 5.
So salty.
Let's go with 5.
When there's a no-lander.
A no-lander. All right, so maybe.
Okay.
So we got Bloom Tender, Archon of Valor's Reach, Chromox, Finale of Devastation, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Kenrith's Transformation, Carpet of Flowers.
This is a nuts hand that this is an awesome 7. This is a great 6, but I don't know how good of a 5 this is, though.
I think you have to keep it.
Because we're at 5. We have to keep it at this point, but we're going to run out all of our ramp. We're going to run out Yasharn, and then we're not going to have anything to do.
Yeah, so
what do you put?
And the Chromox, you definitely bottom Archon. It's just
bottom
too far
Archon,
away.
and then you bottom either Kenrith's Transformation, one of the ramp pieces, or Finale of Devastation.
So you have no land, so this is kind of interesting. So what my gut tells me is we're last, so there's a decent chance that Carpet someone's gonna play an island.
Yeah,
right? We have 4 blue decks. So if you go turn 1, let's say you don't rip a land. Let's say you Chromox pitching Avacyn's Pilgrim.
That seems right.
Cast Carpet of Flower, or maybe you Chromox, you pitch Bloom Tender. Play the Carpet of Flowers, tap the carp, and get the mana off Carpet of Flowers, and play the Avacyn's Pilgrim.
And then you put.
So I guess you need to put Finale Devastation, or probably put Kenrith's Transformation.
I don't know. It's probably.
Or do you keep the Kenrith's transformation?
That's the thing.
Because it's good against Najeela.
After turn 1, your hand's dumped.
Right.
Your hand is dumped, and
We're in a bad situation. We're on
I would keep Kenrith's transformation over Finale of Devastation in this sense, because Finale is only going to get you more mana in this position, pretty much.
Yep. And so if we keep Bloom Tender, Chrome Mox, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Carpet of Flowers, we're dumping like the whole thing right away. But
that's still pretty impressive. We were able to dump our whole hand right away. We're going to get a turn 2 Yasharn.
And we have a way to stop Najeela.
Exactly.
And draw another card. We have to keep this one. And I think the keep is Bloom Tender, Chrome Mox, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Carpet of Flowers, Kenrith's transformation.
I agree with that keep.
And hoping that you can exile something else or hit a land in your first. Because if you hit a land on your first draw,
this turns
you can play land, Chrome Mox, play the Carpet of Flowers, make a mana with it. The Chrome Mox can pitch the Avacyn's Pilgrim, and then you can tap the Chrome Mox and the land that the Carpet produced for a Bloom Tender.
Or if your opponent had a turn 1 Najeela, you can even Kenrith's transformation
right away.
turn
Can't
1
ship and draw a
Najeela.
card. So yeah, this is a hand. It's a keepable 5, I think, but it's obviously not
It sucks that we went to 5.
Yep.
Do you want to do one more?
We'll do one
Let's
more.
do one
Let's
more
do
new
one
game.
more.
A new game.
New game. We're starting at 7. Same pod. We'll keep it at the same pod for now.
This is game 3 of our play
this
to
is
win
the game
match.
3. So our first hand off the bat, it looks I think pretty good. We got Mana Crypt, Gaia's Cradle, Forest, Llanowar Elves, Plains, Living Plane, and Drannith Magistrate.
So again, a lot of mana here. There are 5 cards in this hand that do make mana.
I don't think I think I would keep this.
I would keep this too because
this is a
you
turn 1
have
Drannith Magistrate,
which
play
is
Mana
perfect.
Crypt, Plains, Drannith Magistrate.
So as long as any of your opponents weren't able to get their cheap commanders into play on turn 1, like Drannith Magistrate is shutting down all of those strategies right there.
It's not the best because you're just on Drannith Magistrate and a bunch of ramp, right? But I think that you have Living Plane in your opening hand. That it's not really where you want it to be, but it's fine.
No, but this is a quick out to an Elish Norn, especially because we have
all the ramp
1,
for
2,
it.
3, 4, 5, and then a Gaia's Cradle there.
Yeah.
Too. Gaia's Cradle.
So you should be able to, if you can find any creature tutor in your first couple draws and find an early Elish Norn, this could be a good hand, but it could flop, right? You don't have any interaction.
That's the thing.
If someone goes for a turn 2
Stax
win,
piece.
you're not doing
Living
anything
Plane
about that.
is not a Stax piece. It's your combo piece here. So just jamming out Living Plane, unless you're planning on trying to swing in for damage with Gaia's Cradle, is not going to do you too much.
Yeah, I think this one is a keep, but I'm not thrilled with it.
Me neither.
But I still do think the potential is too high to mulligan. I think just turn 1 Drannith Magistrate, turn 2 Yasharn. You're doing stuff in the early turns and just hope
I
that
think
you draw
there's
into
too
it.
much of a chance for a 6-card hand to mess up.
Yeah,
this.
I would keep this. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Play to Win podcast.
Check out our main show, Play to Win.
That was Yasharn. Thanks for listening. All right, have a good one, everyone.
See you guys. If you're watching this on to the day it releases, come play with us on Discord. We're having one of our Patreon play days that we haven't decided on the name of yet, so...
It's a Discord meetup. It's a Play to Win Discord meetup. It's happening right now. You can come play Magic with us.
Tyler will be here for a little bit. Nate might pop in. I will be there.
I'll definitely be here for 12 hours.
I have to get my car inspected, but I'm just dropping it off, so...
I won't be eating.
I will, but it will be probably while I'm playing. Come see me eat at Discord.